Hey you, out there in the cold, getting lonely, getting old, can you feel me? Hey you, standing in the aisles, I bet you're feeling fleeting smiles, can you feel me? Hey you, don't you help them to bury the love. Don't give in without a fight. I have to decide if that's right for how I feel about today's story. Because the first time I engaged with someone that I realized was deeply mentally ill was with a young lady that I met when I worked at Copley Hospital. I lived with her for about a year. And she, for whatever reason, had what you would call borderline personality. And I didn't know what that was or even had the experience of dealing with someone who was a borderline personality until then. And you go, how do you know, Bob? And the answer is that, one, my mom had met her and spent time around her. And then, two, she was working in a psych ward. And she said, hey, here's a handout on borderline personality. Do any of these things sound familiar? And suddenly I went, oh my gosh, my roommate is a borderline personality, and it's manifesting in ways that I now see. She would tell just extraordinary lies for no reason. That it just, I'd never come across that. Couldn't hold a job, lots of other things. And it got really dysfunctional at the end of the relationship as I tried to break it off. In fact, I was working at the hospital, and I asked, we had two psychologists that worked on the unit from time to time. And I think I might have asked both of them, but I know I at least asked one of them. So I think my roommate is a borderline personality. How do I break this off? Is there a good way to do this? And the answer he gave was, no, these are always going to be messy. And it was very difficult to break off the relationship. And in fact, I eventually, with her mother, tried to admit her to a hospital, and then she ended up back at home and got picked up. And there's a whole backstory to this that gets really bizarre, but the fact was, I moved away into a new place, and the old apartment was happy to have the two of us go because apparently her behavior had caught a lot of attention. But I moved out, and I had a new place. And it turned out, shortly after I got back from New Orleans, still in the middle of winter, I got a knock at my door. And a guy was there, and he said, hey, I've slid in the parking lot on some ice. And I think I hit your car. So I go out, and this young lady had recruited 3 guys somewhere in the world and a moving truck that she was hiding behind and lured me out. And I know that I've kind of jumped around here a little bit, but because the relationship ended so poorly, I actually went and got a restraining order, an emergency restraining order. All I was supposed to do was call the police, and they'd come deliver the thing, and I'd have protection. And so I looked around the edge of the truck because I was at my car, and I saw that she was there. She didn't see me. And I ran to the local laundromat, and I called 911. And I said, hey, I've got a restraining order, and she's back in my house right now. And I said, what should I do? Should I go back? She said, yeah, we'll have somebody respond. And so I went back, and the police never came. And so after being accosted by one of the gentlemen, and after being sprayed with pepper spray by her, and hit by her, which I deserved, I eventually came to an agreement to let one of the gentlemen in to get some other stuff. I put most of her stuff on the porch of Mom's. And the next morning I went to work, and I got a call from my landlord about 8:30 or 9. and they'd broken back in the front door, and they'd taken everything else that I owned. And so, like anybody, I called the police, and the police came out, and I told them the story. And of course, there's a 911 recording that, the night before I'd called, and I couldn't believe it. And the policeman basically said, "There's nothing we can do." I had taken the license plate number of one of the gentlemen, and he looked it up and he gave me that and his information, but that didn't do me any good. And I suddenly was faced with this challenge. I was in the middle of probation, or at the end of probation, for my marijuana and cocaine charge. And here I needed the police's help because I had just been robbed by someone who was mentally ill, and they did nothing. I was able to attain the address for her new apartment a couple of months later, before I was moving back to Wisconsin. And I called the police department in Hillcrest and said, "Hey, this individual robbed me. I'm pretty sure. All the evidence seems to point. Can you help me?" And the answer was, the best I can do is call and make threats, But they didn't do anything. And I try not to be jaded about what it is I expect from police. But I hadn't found, at that point, an alignment with my welfare. And not only that, but I was dealing with someone with mental illness, and society didn't really seem to have an understanding of how to deal with someone who had borderline personality disorder. Years later, probably 98, maybe 99, I think it was 99, I was coming home from the Twin Cities. I worked over in Bloomington, across from the airport, and I was carpooling with a friend of mine. And as we were getting to the bridge over the St. Croix River, I saw a car ahead of me. And I don't know what made me look at the car or pull up on the driver's side of the car, but when I looked in, I'm almost certain it was my ex-roommate. And as I backed off to get off the on-ramp, the license plate was Illinois, and the dealership was either Naperville, which is where her parents were from, or Oakdale, or in that area. And if there is a truly odd synchronicity, and that was her, it was a way of the universe saying, "Hey, just so you know, your friend has changed, and not for the better." We had nicknames for each other. We called each other Maynard. That was her choice. And I did. I loved her. I cared about her. And it was so distressing, as I would later learn through other experiences, that mental illness is so pervasive and so difficult, because how do you help someone who doesn't understand why they're acting the way they're acting or who they are? And I didn't have enough perspective on the experiences of this individual. And I was thrust into a very dysfunctional person's life. And years later, over my life, as I've looked around, I've realized that we're really not dealing with mental illness like we think we are. What we're dealing with is we're dealing with experiences that create patterns that are disruptive. And if we can disrupt the disruptive patterns, we can help people. And so, to Maynard, if you're still out there, I still think about you, and I hope you're well. And for those out there who have family and friends who deal with mental illness, find them some mushrooms. Sit down and have a conversation. Talk to them. Help them find their authentic self. I do. I believe firmly in the medicine. And if there's one thing I've learned in my life, it's that you have to fight to be happy. It's a good fight, though. It's the one that says I'm not going to be defeated. As I think about it, Years ago, I made the decision that I would not be a victim to somebody telling me why I couldn't succeed. I was going to succeed no matter what anybody told me. And that's the kind of attitude of I'm going to be okay that we need. It's one that says, don't give in without a fight. Don't give in. Thank you, everybody. Peace.